Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's case, we have the case of Jane Doe versus Brown University. In this case, Jane Doe was found to be cheating on her college exams. It was her second time caught cheating, and she was suspended by the university. Somehow not expelled by Brown, but she was suspended. And she's grumpy that Brown University didn't give her what she deems to be due process. So we're going to find out about Jane Doe and her cheating and all this fun stuff, and let's get started with this. Good times. Jane Doe brought a suit against Brown University and 3 of its employees, alleging a number of contract and tort claims arising from Brown's sanctions against her for her second violation of the university's Code of Academic Conduct. The district court enters summary judgment in Brown's favor, which Doe appeals. We affirm. Doe studied at Brown as an undergraduate from the fall semester of 2010 through her graduation in the spring semester of 2014. In 2013, the fall semester of Doe's senior year, she enrolled in Public Health 320, a course taught by Professor Melissa Clark, one of the defendants here. Professor Clark's course included a 2-part midterm exam consisting of an in-class multiple choice exam as well as a take-home exam that included 4 essay questions, the take-home exam or the exam. While grading the take-home exams, a teaching assistant noticed similarities between Doe's answer to the exam's 4th question and that of TL, another student in the class. Similar exam answers. Well, that is a bit suspicious. I wonder what happened. Doe met with Professor Clark the next day, and according to Doe, she readily admitted in that meeting that she and other students, including TL, had collaborated on the exam. Doe also explained to Professor Clark that the majority of the students in class had worked in groups on the exam, and that this collaboration was in line with Professor Clark's regular encouragement of such collaboration and group discussions in her course. I don't think that was exactly what they had in mind when they were saying, it's a good idea to talk to fellow students. I don't think they were saying, pool your resources for the final exam. That wasn't quite what they had in mind, but nice try. A few days later, Doe received an email explaining that she would need to meet with Christopher Dennis, the deputy dean of the college, about her exam. At the meeting, she again acknowledged her collaboration. Brown notified Doe that it had assigned her matter to the university's Committee on the Academic Code for a hearing. Before the hearing, Doe submitted a written statement to the committee in which she acknowledged that, after comparing my take-home exam with another individual, TL, there are similarities between the two for question number 4. Doe further explained that it was late at night and I was suffering from fatigue. I was struggling on coming up with innovative ideas for question 4. I used TL suggestions, and when they were explained to me, the thought of those were those who blurred. Doe's statement concluded with a request for the committee to understand where she's coming from and forgive me for my mistake. So basically, the student has claimed that she was really tired and that she collaborated because she was really tired, and that makes it okay for some reason. Okay. Doe chose not to call any witnesses, and opting instead to admit and apologize for having relied on TL in answering question 4. Neither Professor Clark nor TL appeared as witnesses. The committee concluded that by making unauthorized use of work of another on the exam, Doe had violated Brown's academic code. After considering that this was Doe's second violation of the code, second violation of the academic code at an Ivy university, the committee assessed the following sanctions: a 1-semester suspension, including termination of university access and related privileges, 1-semester suspension for cheating on a final exam, her second violation of an academic code at Brown University. Wow, man. Notations on her academic transcript about the suspension stating direct no credit in Public Health 320 and violation of the academic code, parental notification, and denial of any future institutional letter of support, alternatively, a discussion of Doe's offense in all such letters. I'm still stuck on 1 semester as a second violation for cheating on a final exam. I don't think Brown takes their academic code super serious. Of course, at this point, Jane Doe had learned her lesson and she realized that she had been given a chance she didn't deserve. At this point, she decided to fly right and just admit her wrongdoing and nothing more ever happened ever again. No, pretty much the opposite of those things. Let's read on. Doe filed a 13-count complaint against Brown and 3 individual defendants alleging various tort and contract claims. We're now going to sue the university because I was a cheater and disciplined. That's just great. The crux of Doe's theory underlying her claims was that Brown's disciplinary process in her case was deficient and biased when compared with the procedures prescribed under the academic code, and further, that Brown had imposed overly punitive sanctions for Doe's violations. Overly punitive sanctions. She cheated on a final exam. It was her second offense of a violation of the honor code. She was sanctioned to a semester suspension. Overly punitive. Wow. On June the 27th, 2016, the district court entered a judgment dismissing Doe's claim for unreasonable publicity to one's private life and granting summary judgment to the defendant on all remaining counts. The court also denied the request for additional discovery. Unreasonable publicity. Wow. Heaven forbid we let people know that we caught a cheater. Oh my word. Jeez. Wow. Under Rhode Island law, the relationship between student and private university is based in contract. The parties agree that the relevant terms of the contractual relationship between student and university typically involve language found in the university's student handbook. Because contracts for private education have unique qualities, we must construe them in a manner that leaves the school administration broad discretion to meet its educational and doctrinal responsibilities. We interpret the code's terms in accordance with the parties' reasonable expectations, giving those terms the meaning the university reasonably should expect the student to take from them. To prevail on the merits, she would need to establish a typical breach of contract claim, which requires that a contract existed, there be a breach of contract, and the breach caused plaintiff damages. Doe claims that Brown failed to provide her with copies of the work in question, failed to provide her with a list of faculty advisors to consult prior to the hearing, failed to provide her with a notice of the charges against her, denied her the right to present witnesses in her case, and denied her the right to examine witnesses against her and dispute the evidence against her. These assertions do not withstand close scrutiny. For starters, the code does not mandate that Brown supply an accused student with copies of the exam in question. Moreover, the code allows the student to offer evidence and witness at her support, yet Doe offers no arguments to explain how, if at all, Brown precluded her from satisfying this burden. There is no evidence that Doe was prevented from calling any witnesses, and the university did not call any witnesses itself. Doe's argument that Brown violated the code by failing to present her with a list of potential advisors and failing to provide her with notice of charges against her merit more discussion. The code requires that Brown, through a case administrator, shall, as soon as possible, notify the accused student of the specific charges of dishonesty, the time and place of the hearing, the nature of the evidence that will be presented against the student, and the range of penalties that may be imposed if the committee finds that academic dishonesty has occurred. Personally, I'd like to know what the range of potential penalties even were. I'd like to know if they even threatened to expel this girl. And that's what I'd like to know right now. The code states the case administrator will provide the accused student with a list of persons who can provide knowledgeable advice. We make several assumptions, all in Doe's favor. The first is that the code does not require repeated notice that Brown will provide students with a list of such persons. The second is that Brown was required to give her such a list during the 2013 disciplinary process, regardless of her earlier discipline. The third is that despite her conversations with Professor Clark the day after the exam and her meeting with Dean Dennis, she was not given formal notice of the charges. Even assuming these failures constitute breaches of code on the part of Brown, however, we struggle to see the causal connection between those breaches and Doe's alleged damages, which include academic sanctions against her. This is because Doe herself, on multiple occasions, admitted to the facts giving rise to the violation. Yes, usually a confession is considered sufficient in courts of law and pretty much everywhere else. So you confess to it, that's kind of like the end of the case. In her December 2nd, 2013 meeting with Professor Clark, Doe acknowledged her collaboration with a group of other students to include TL. She repeated this acknowledgement in subsequent meetings with Dean Dennis. The record thus indicates that between Doe's admission and almost identical answers of Doe and TL on question 4, that includes no acknowledgement of the collaboration between the students, Doe had failed to provide facts on which a reasonable jury could find the committee's result would have changed Brown's compliance with the code procedures provisions, even assuming they require a subsequent disciplinary proceeding to provide notice and information. Once the process began, Doe could reasonably be expected to navigate it with some skill, even without advisor, given that this was her second time through. I appreciate the court burning Doe. I appreciate them saying, you knew how to do this because you've done this before. This is your second time through, so you know what to do. You had plenty of help. So I love that little subtle burn there at the court by the court. That's a nice little bit of burn. I appreciate that. Doe's next set of challenges look outside the plain letter of the code to claim that Brown breached its implied duty of good faith and fair dealing, which exists in every contract in Rhode Island law. And pretty much exists in every contract, period. It's a part of the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. Good faith and fair dealing is a implied covenant of every contract. You have to behave to another in a fair way. Yes. Broadly, Doe presents two challenges. First, she maintains that Professor Clark's collaboration policy was vague, inconsistent, and unfair. Pleading unfairness. This is a lot of hubris. This is a lot of entitlement. This is a lot of chutzpah. This is a lot of things, man. This is I don't even know where to start, man. I will say I'm feeling a lot better about the value of my Clemson degree, and I'm very happy I didn't graduate from Brown at this point. So I'm feeling good about that. This argument misses the mark in light of the undisputed facts. Even if Professor Clark had explicitly allowed students to work in groups on the exam, there's no reasonable basis to conclude that when Doe submitted an answer nearly identical to TL's without indicating it was a result of collaboration, she did not commit a code violation. Doe also asserts that Brown's imposition of a lower sanction against TL than her is a result of bias. Wow. Yet, unlike TL, she was sanctioned for her second code violation. The code expressly contemplates higher penalties for repeat offenses. If a one-semester suspension is a higher penalty, I'd like to know what her earlier penalty was for her first violation of an academic code of misconduct. If one semester was the higher penalty, what was the lower penalty? In absence of any additional facts, Doe has not shown that Brown acted arbitrarily or in bad faith. By our lights, the record makes clear that Doe and TL's answer to the exam were nearly identical, and that Doe did not indicate her admitted collaboration with TL on her exam as required by the code. Therefore, additional discovery on any issue Doe has raised in her request, specifically to include Professor Clark's collaboration policy and Brown's initiation of proceedings against other students or lack thereof, would do nothing to undermine Doe's naked violation of the code. Accordingly, we join the district court in concluding that Doe has failed to show how the information to be obtained would have defeated the defendant's motion for summary judgment. So we can't end it there. Let's take note of two facts before we continue. Let's remind ourselves of two critical facts. First of all, this happened during the fall semester of her senior year. So she was basically two semesters away from graduating. So she was a senior. And the course in question was Public Health 320. The number 3 normally indicates juniors or above, but of course that's not an ironclad rule. But we can assume from the number 320 that it was an upper level course. And with this bearing in mind, with the fact that she was a senior, and the fact that there was an upper level course, and the fact that this was Brown University, a prestigious Ivy level university, we would be remiss if we did not read her answer to the exam question. So let's do that. Let's read her example. Let's read her answer to the exam question and learn what seniors at Brown University are turning out in Public Health 320. Unfortunately, we do not have the original question to question 4 to know what the question is in response to, but I'm sure from her answer we can divine the question that prompted this lucid, wonderful answer from the senior, that is Jane Doe. So we're going to read Jane Doe's statement on the right, and you can read the original for yourself on the left. Not that you need to, because they're basically the same, as you can plainly see for yourself. Let's now read Jane Doe's answer. In order to address the issues surrounding safe sex education, schools should incorporate mandatory safe sex education as part of the health class curriculum on a statewide scale. This way, the information that is provided to adolescents is consistent and therefore can be more accessible. This intervention could help improve the awareness of surrounding the issue of safe sex practices. In order for children to retain and understand this information, it should be reinforced through several years of safe sex education. Therefore, it is important to provide this form of education to younger populations of adolescents. This form of education should start as early as 6th grade or middle school. This would be the best way to proactively reinforce this education. This education would continue up until the 12th grade and would be presented with the same information regarding safe sex practices. By presenting this information consistently, this allows adolescents to be able to retain and comprehend the importance of safe sex. It's important to acknowledge adolescents' pregnancies as an important way to prevent the excessive gestational weight gain, because this population is at risk for high-risk pregnancies. Risk for high risk. Okay, wow. This is directly determinative to the health issue of excessive maternal GWG. What's GWD? G? What? What's the acronym? GWG. An acronym that's not explained. That's great. Just an acronym that's not explained. That's great. The education and health departments at each school should be responsible for not only the education of children about sexual education and safe sex practices, but should also be able to provide education to those who are pregnant. These departments at the school should provide the resources necessary to educate them further on adolescent pregnancies. By helping these adolescents who are pregnant, this can help reduce high-risk pregnancies. State health departments should work with their sexual education programs in order to provide students with information and services that are easily accessible to all students of all ages regarding adolescent pregnancies. I feel that if this is representative of what a senior at an Ivy League education can write in response to a final exam question, I don't really feel like I missed much by not going to Ivy League school. I feel just fine with my ACC education. Thank you very much. So that is the end of the case of Jane Doe versus Brown University. In this case, we learned that an entitled young woman who is entitled on levels that I really want to use particular language to describe that is more profane in nature in describing this young woman, but I will restrain myself, but you can probably guess what I think. This young woman who was convicted of her second violation of the academic code of conduct at Brown was suspended for 1 semester, God save us all, and actually did graduate from Brown. She brings a complaint against Brown University and all these individuals individually because she was displeased with the due process she got. She is entitled on levels, and the only thing that makes me sad is that I do not know her name. She remains anonymous, which I guess is good for her, not so good for us, but that is the end of this case.